Welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, brought to you by TournamentPokerEdge.com, the only podcast dedicated exclusively to poker tournament strategy. Now here's your host, Clayton Fletcher.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast. My name is Clayton Fletcher, and I am in fabulous Las Vegas, but not just in fabulous Las Vegas. I'm in the fabulous Poker.org Legends Room, where on July 1st, I will be performing on the big, beautiful stage here in the Poker.org Legends Room, which is located inside the Horseshoe Casino, formerly Bally's. For those who remember the good old days of Bally's, a good place to have things stolen from you, but that's another story. I'm in the Poker.org Legends Room. It is beautiful. This looks like a great place for a comedy show. And I believe 8 p.m. on July 1st, you can come and see me perform for free alongside Joe Stapleton, Caitlin Komeski, and possibly a few other special guests. It's absolutely free, but you have to be here early because seating is first come, first served. Week 4 of my World Series of Poker adventure is coming to a close, and I'm going to be honest, weeks 1 and 2 were much better than weeks 3 and 4. It has been a struggle, but as you guys know, the only way to get out of a losing streak is to play through it. So that's what I'm doing. I'm keeping my chin up, I'm keeping my spirits high, and I know that my luck will turn around sooner or later. Those of you who have been following me day to day on my Substack, which by the way is also free, and you can hear detailed accounts of my day-to-day adventures here in Sin City. Now guys, today I have a returning champion, a third-time guest, someone that you guys know very well. He's actually been heads up for a bracelet in last year's Summer of Poker, and I believe he's doing pretty darn well this year as well. Welcome back to the program, Mr. Brent Lee. Brent, how you been?
Doing fantastic, Clayton. And I know you don't like Bally's, but a few years back it was weird. I was walking down the hallway and saw an open door, and I went in and got a free laptop. So I'm actually a big fan of Bally's, but it's kind of weird.
Yeah, you stole my passport and my old cell phone, too. You guys should listen to old episodes from several years ago to hear what the heck we're talking about. But yeah, I was a burglary victim at this very property before the new ownership took over.
So yeah, glad to hear you had some success early on. I actually was the opposite. First couple of weeks for me were terrible. It felt like the 2 weeks of 3 outers, getting it in good. However, my luck has kind of turned around. The past 2 weeks have been really well. Got a final table, ran deep, did pretty well, and made the money in the Battle of the Ages, which concluded yesterday. So I was the exact opposite. First 2 weeks were terrible. Last 2 have been pretty good. Yeah,
well, that's good. I'm glad that, the upswing is coming for you. Maybe that's a sign it might start coming for me as well. I know that I'm playing well. And, for those who listen every week, you know that in the weeks leading up to the WSOP, I was working a lot on my mindset and kind of preparing myself for all the different things that can happen, whether it's somebody hitting a 2-outer or somebody nagging you and berating you at the table, or just an extended period where you lose all the flips and your good hands can't hold up. And so I feel like doing all that sort of visualization, if you will, the mental preparation has put me in a position where, I'm not happy that I'm on a downswing, but I don't feel like I'm getting down in the dumps about it. So I know that you don't necessarily play full-time professionally, but that said, Brent, you put in a lot of volume. So what are kind of your secrets for managing when things aren't going your way?
Yeah, a couple things that I always tend to think about is I always say, what's the worst thing that can happen? If you think about other people that are in dire circumstances, obviously lots going on in our world right now. If you think about the people overseas and the things that they're dealing with, all of a sudden getting 3-outered on the river doesn't seem like such a bad thing. So I always try to keep things in perspective. That's number one. We're vertical, we're healthy, we're doing something that we love. So variance is variance. You can just make the right play. The results are going to be what the results are. You can't affect what cards are coming. So just being in that mind space. Alex Fitzgerald, in one of his books, I think it was, the 100 Tips book that he put out recently at DMB, he said something in there that you've got to be able to laugh at it. When those cards hit, you did the right thing. It didn't work out, but just having that attitude and just kind of laughing it off and moving on and saying, well, I'll get them next time It's a long game. It's a long run. Hopefully you guys aren't only playing one tournament, and eventually the odds will get there.
Yeah, as long as you play within your bankroll and you're not, risking it all on one single tournament. Can you imagine the stress you would feel if you put your bottom dollar on like a 10K main event? Like, are you really going to be able to play your best under those conditions? Of course not.
Yeah, and even though I've had decent success in the poker world, I'm still hesitant to play those larger buy-in events because I know that it potentially could affect my game. Sometimes I've considered looking into backers or some of the staking platforms that are out there, but I think that adds a whole nother level of stress. All of a sudden, you're kind of playing with somebody else's money, and you feel responsible for that. So staying within your bankroll is absolutely key. That's why I love the sort of $1,000 to $1,500 buy-in. I feel like that's good. Outside of the main's a special thing. Everybody should do it once. We all strive to do it. But outside of the main, those larger bankrolls, unless you've had a significant win and are really showing up, it's tough.
Yeah, really good advice there from Brent Lee, third-time guest here on the podcast. You attended a comedy show in the back room of a bar in North Carolina in our 4 Lone Riders episode. And then also we had you on a while back as well. Brent, tell me your Twitter handle again.
Yeah, so it's at NC Tarwheel, like North Carolina Tar Heels, but WHEEL for those of you that play Split Pot Omaha. So NC Tarwheel.
There you go. So now, Brent, you mentioned the Battle of the Ages, a tournament that I also played in. That was a new format this year. For those who don't know, in the morning, the senior circuit played, so you have to be over 49 to enter the 10 a.m. flight. And then on day one, in the afternoon, everyone who is under 50 would play in that flight. And then for day 2, the fields combined. So talk about the dynamics. You did make it to day 2. Just talk about the dynamics. And do you think that it at any point did it feel like an actual battle of the ages, like the old guys versus the young guys?
So unfortunately, I entered day 2, fairly short stack. I only had 9 big blinds entering day 2. So I didn't get an opportunity to play super deep. Although if you have ever played with the OMCs or the regs in a lot of the casinos, you know that it's a very, very different style of play. I am still just, under the 50 mark. So I got to play the younger flight that started at 4 o'clock. And that was pretty typical to the type of tournament fields that we see. Moving into day 2, looking at chip stacks, I could tell the play was going to be different for day 2. I wish I'd have just been a little bit more healthy so that I could have gone a little bit deeper and really exploited that.
Yeah, you could see there were definitely some opportunities there and some spots. All right, well, let's not talk about the tournament. You didn't go that deep in. Let's talk about the final table. What tournament was it? What happened? And maybe we can even get into some hands.
Yeah, so that was the one that I had my deep run in. That was the Independence Day from 2024. I think it was event 80 last year. So that was just a 2-day. It was a very, very long 2 days, but went all the way to the end. I actually entered heads-up play as a 5-1 chip favorite. Got it in good twice, lost both flips to then put me as the dog. My opponent did a fantastic play, slow played kings against my top pair, good kicker. Kings, he had kings, I had the queen. And then the final hand just was, it is what it is. So it was the learning experience for me. I had never been in that type of high pressure, high money, playing for the bracelet situation before. Learned a lot. Thankful for the experience and looking forward to trying to repeat something this year.
As we sit here about halfway through the summer of poker, the WSOP and all the other tournaments around town, you've got to think, last year I almost had the bracelet, almost caught the glory, had a 5-1 chip lead heads up. I'm wishing you lots and lots of deep runs and final tables this summer. Do you ever lose sleep like, oh man, I was that close to like having my name on the list of bracelet winners, or does that not really enter your thinking?
It was, especially the month after the bracelet. You rethink almost every single hand. Could you have done anything differently? Gosh, what could I have done? And you just want to get back to that opportunity. As we said earlier, as long as you're playing well, making the right decisions, it will come. About a month after I got runner-up to the bracelet, I did knock down a circuit ring, and I've gotten a couple trophies since. So I know I'm playing well. I know it'll go there. I've had a final table already this summer. I feel like I'm playing well. It's just you got to put in the reps, and eventually it'll come.
Yeah, and I hear you about the trophies. Like I have some hardware at home, but We all want the bracelet, man. There's nothing that compares to that. Maybe that trophy they give out at the championship with the win, like that's like a replica of the win itself. I would love to have that, one of those at home. But otherwise, man, it's all about the bracelet, and that's what we all dream of.
Absolutely, and that is the goal and what we strive for. I know a lot of people play the various events around here at summer camp, going to Venetian. I know you're a huge fan of the win. Orleans has some great tournaments, Aria too, but it's the magnet, the gravitation to play here at the WSOP simply because those are the bracelet events. This is where they are.
Yeah, they've got us. I mean, this is the big leagues, and they've got us here. No matter how much they raise the rake, no matter how much they screw the players, we're just going to keep coming back because we're just basically a bunch of suckers. But enough about that, Brent. I know you had some hands that you wanted to run through with me, and we can do like we always do. We'll stop when it's your turn to make a decision, talk about your options, and then you can tell me and the listeners what you did. I have not seen these hands in advance, but in hindsight, for possibly next week's podcast, I'll probably take one or two of these hands and run them through GTO Wizard, which is a tool that I use to really improve my poker game. You can study virtually any spot. You can, put in the hand that you had, how many big blinds you had, what the situation was, what kind of tournament it was, and then the wizard would tell you how a perfect computer, like basically the AI version of David Peters, would play that spot in the long run. Maybe it's 30% this, 70% that, or not 0% of whatever decision you decided to make. And it's very helpful. I think this tool is extremely user-friendly and something that everybody should try. And you can actually try it for free. If you click the link in the description of this podcast, you can have 24 hours free access to all of GTO Wizard's features. And then when you're ready to purchase, you can save 10% off of your first purchase because you use our affiliate link, which is gtowizard.com/p/TPE. So Brent, what tournament were you playing in the hand that we're going to go over today?
So this particular hand, so this one's a three-way hand. So I'm also a GTO Wizard user myself. So this one's going to be a little bit harder to evaluate. But the second hand is going to be heads up, which will be pretty easy to take a look at.
Perfect.
This particular hand was actually, it is also a bracelet event. It was a $500 freeze out. And so anyone that knows tournaments, a freeze out, you cannot re-entry. Once you're done, you're done. You just get one swing at the bat. So people tend to play a little bit differently in those tournaments. This was a very, very oddly played hand, and quite frankly, I found myself in a difficult spot and was really trying to think through ranges. So I'd love your input on this one.
Before we get into it here, Brent, something you just said kind of struck me. Do you really see a material difference between the way players approach those tournaments, like let's say the Gladiators, where you can buy in as many times as you want? Do you really notice a difference in playing styles just when re-entries are not allowed?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference that you see is the late reg spinners. When you look at things like the Gladiator, the Colossus, all those type events, you have the guys that'll come in level 8, or if you're registering at level 12, they'll come in late level 10, level 11, and they're willing to fire multiple bullets and just get it in good. They're looking for the real thin value equity doubles. That way they can try to triple up and get above an average stack without having to play the first 8, 9, 10, 12 levels. Really difficult to play against, right? You wake up with aces, but you still don't have that much equity over in the king queen. They can still get there. So that's a little bit different. When people are playing for their tournament life, especially at that $500 buy-in point, they're a little bit more conservative, a little bit standard ranges, a little bit easier to read, and the field's a little bit different.
You make me want to enter some more freeze-outs this summer. All right, so let's hear this hand. You already kind of gave us a hint that it's going to be oddly played, I'm assuming, by your opponent.
Yeah, and myself as well, but I will certainly try to give some insight into my thoughts, and I would love to hear the listeners' feedback on if they'd have done anything different and what they thought.
Yeah, a good place to give that kind of feedback, guys, is we have really lively discussions about hands discussed on the podcast in the TPE Discord. That's also free. Everything I'm promoting today is free, guys. Even the comedy show, July 1st, it's free. So you guys can go on the in the description, you'll find the link to our Discord, and you can join that, and you can talk to me and Brent right in there, as well as all of our other TPE community members, and we give each other feedback on hands that we played and just, kind of different topics. There's a whole section of that Discord dedicated just to the podcast, and that's where you would find thoughts on this hand. So let's hear it, Brent. Where are we at?
Okay, so this particular hand, I actually had just busted out of another tournament and ran to do it as a late reg for me and bought into level 8. So at the time, bought in, had 15 big blinds, was able to spin up to slightly more than average stack.
And when does registration actually close for this one?
For this one, registration closed after level 12.
Okay.
And this is a 30-minute level, so there were still 2 hours to go in the tournament. However, this particular, when I first bought in, I was still already semi-short stack. I was able to 2.x triple up at one point and had slightly above average stack. They moved to a different ballroom, and then I sat down at a brand new table, so I know very, very little about this table other than the gentleman directly to my right is by far the chip leader, perhaps one of the chip leaders in the tournament, massive stack. So on this particular hand, I am sitting on the button. I have 24.5 big blinds.
Is this the 4.8 or 400, 800 level?
So the level on this, this would have been the 3,000, 6,000 level.
Oh, wow. So this tournament really flies.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. So that's 147,000 in chips when the blinds are 366. So sitting on 24.5 big blinds, the undergun opened for the min click, so opened for 12, 2 big blinds. The hijack directly to my right, the monster stack we talked about, called. I'd only seen one round at this point. He was very active, very high VPIP, but usually just calling. And so we wake up on the button with Queen, Jack, Heart, Heart.
Yeah, so I was hoping you would have a slightly better hand than that. I think even with King, Jack, Heart, Heart, we can shove this stack because if you look, once it goes raise, call, that's 4 big blinds. And then there's also the big blind itself who had to put in 2 big blinds. So there's 6.5 big blinds in the pot already by the time it's Brent's turn to act. And he's only starting with less than 25. So I think King, Jack suited is probably a profitable shove here. Queen Jack, I think, is a little weak. I really don't like folding because you're in position and you've got a hand that flops really well. I don't think we want to put this hand in our non-shove 3-bet range because you can just get into so many hairy spots with that. So I know Andrew Brokus always says, and I always repeat, calling is not a compromise. But in this case, I feel like it's not a compromise. It's actually the best play. So I'm just going to put in the 12K and see what happens.
And that was exactly my thought as well. The other thing that I had a consideration is the under the gun that opened for the min click for the 2 big blinds also was a slightly shorter stack than I was. And so reopening the action with a 3-bet could very easily turn into a 4-bet jam. And then all of a sudden I'm laying down a hand that has pretty good pre-flop equity.
Or calling off with a hand that doesn't. Yeah.
Right,
So those are the kind of hairy situations that I want to avoid and not get into. Although I think shoving does become a little bit more attractive. In that case, I didn't realize that you had him slightly covered. Given what you already said about freeze outs generally and the way that people tend to be careful because they know they can't re-enter, you might get him to fold some pretty big hands because a shove here would look very strong from you. And then if he does find the call with like 10s, you're still a coin flip, right? The problem is I don't know this player and I don't know how many hands are going to be raised folding off of such a short stack. Like if he's got 20 bigs, you're under the gun, raised folding range is very, very small.
Yeah, and that was a consideration as well. Again, I'd only seen approximately 8 hands up until this point. He did have a Eastern European accent, which they tend to be a little more aggressive. And so
a little, yeah, maybe a little.
So I did take that into consideration. I ended up doing exactly what you said. I didn't want to give up the equity, and I just flatted the raise as well. The blinds then folded, and so there were 8.5 big blinds in the pot when we got the flop.
Okay, so 8.5 big blinds is?
So 51,000 is now going to be in the pot, and I am sitting with 135,000 back.
All right, so we have an SPR under 3. We've got Queen Jack of Hearts. We have 3 opponents. 3 opponents,
under the gun, and then the chip leader to my right.
And then you called.
And then me on the button, yep.
And the big blind called too?
No, the blind's actually folded.
Okay, so we have 2 opponents.
Yes.
All right, so what's the flop?
The flop became ace, king, queen with 2 clubs and a heart. The king was a heart.
Okay, so we've got bottom pair, a gut shot, and a backdoor flush draw. on a board that probably hit one or both of our opponents a lot. So what's the action?
Yeah, very, very wet board there. The under the gun let out for 2.5 big blinds, which in this case is going to be, 18. So let out for 18. Then the chip leader just called and put us in the same position where we had to make a decision whether we continue with the hand or give up with a hand that has some backdoor equity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're ahead ever, first off. But the problem is we just have decent winning chances. We might be able to win with a queen. We might be able to win with a jack. We certainly can win with a 10, and we can pick up equity with a heart. Now, if this bet sizing on the flop had been a little bit chunkier, like suppose he bets half pot instead of like quarter pot or whatever he did, then I think we could maybe start thinking about folding, even though I hate to lose that equity. Just your survival is so important. You know, like you say, it's a freeze out. So, I mean, this isn't exactly what we were hoping to flop, but I think we just caught just big enough of a piece to continue. So then the question just becomes, is there any merit to raising? Like, I really don't want to fold. We've got too much going on here. And I just don't think we can really get through both of them enough to raise. So once again, I think I'm landing on a call here.
And that is exactly my thoughts as well, especially as large as the big stack was. He was playing table bully. 100,000 chips to him is not going to affect his stack.
Okay, Brent, but is there a chance we're ahead of him?
That's the tough decision.
Right? Like if we're ever ahead of him and we can get all in with him and a pair of queens is actually good.
And if we can move the under the gun off of let's say a strong king, then we're getting the better to fold and we're getting the worse to call, which is obviously the goal we're always looking at. In this particular case, it being a freeze out, I potentially was a little bit gun shy.
So maybe when you said that people play differently in freeze outs, you meant yourself too.
It obviously is a consideration rather than just being able to go fire another bullet. But I opted to do exactly what you said. I felt like there was too much things to come that could have made the hand. And so I did back off, and I just did the call there as well. So that then inflated the pot up to about 96,000, and we've got 120K behind.
Okay, so here's the scenario where we are slightly ahead, is when one of our opponents has some kind of weird flush draw with like 8-7 of clubs, and the other one has pocket tens, right? That's about the only case I can actually think of where, or maybe one of them could have queen 10, because we're actually ahead of queen 10 at the moment. So otherwise, I think there's a great chance we're behind in this scenario. And I really don't like to bluff more than one opponent very much, and especially on such a wet board, draw-heavy wet board with all of these chips on my right, and the guy, like you say, he's not afraid to stick them in. I feel like calling is the best play here on the turn.
Yeah, and you've got the under the gun who is out of position leading into two other players on that wet board. That's got to be a concern as well, because normally you're going to be checking a lot of flops there unless you just absolutely smashed it. So that was a concern as well.
Yeah, and it does hit his overall range way harder than it hits ours. He can have aces, kings, and queens. We really shouldn't. He can have ace-king. We really shouldn't. Ace-queen, we shouldn't have that, right? Those are all hands we should have been 3-betting pre-flop. So he's got a range advantage. He probably doesn't have a nuts advantage because anybody can have Jack 10 on this board, but he's not scared to bet it. So, yeah, I don't like raising. I think calling is fine, especially because he bets so small. Again, I would start folding to a half-pot bet here for sure.
Yeah, and I felt the same way. The odds were way too good to see if we could, pick up another heart or, start filling out that straight. So the turn was an action card. The turn was the queen of clubs, so it brought in the flush, gave us the trips, and we still have our backdoor draw for the straight.
Okay, so there's actually some chance that we're practically drawing dead. Right? Like if somebody has pocket aces or pocket kings, we're actually drawing dead to a queen. We have to catch, we have one out against those hands. That's obviously the ultimate monsters under the bed, awful scenario. We do have outs, like you mentioned, versus a flush or a straight. Yeah, that particular turn card is a double-edged sword, I think. I'm not sure how I feel about it, although there's a better chance that I'm ahead right now than there was on the previous street. I still don't know how much I like this queen. So what happens?
Yeah, well, and thinking about the ranges that we're doing it, the only person that's probably going to have those aces or kings, the monsters under the bed, if you will be that under the gun.
Correct.
I can't imagine the chip leader just flatting. So
Never, no.
Yeah, so the nuts advantage still sits with under the gun. So in this particular case, the under the gun now checks. And the chip leader bets a very, very, very strange amount. He only bets $24,000 into the $96,000 pot on the turn.
Okay, so we have to interpret that sizing. I know the solver doesn't really use a very small turn sizing very often. It could be that he has a flush and he's concerned that one or both of you can beat a flush now that the board has paired. So many combos, king, queen, ace, queen, right? They're all beating a flush right now. But he still wants to try to get some value for, like I said before, he could have like an 8-7 of clubs type of hand. That's one explanation. Another explanation is that he's got a queen. And if he's got a queen, we actually have him beat. If he doesn't have a full house and he's got a queen, we're ahead of him. But he doesn't know what to do and he doesn't want to check. Well, how did you interpret this small bet?
Clayton, so first and foremost, you really need to get out of my head. It's a little disconcerting because we're thinking exactly the same thing. Very strange bet. It felt a bit like a pro bet. You mentioned Andrew Brokus earlier, and he always says you never bet to see where you are, right? But that's kind of what this bet felt like. I also thought about potentially a combo draw. Yes, I've got a weaker queen beat. Maybe the king was the heart. Maybe he's got a king of clubs, so he picked up a backdoor club draw with the nut club draw, and he's trying to do a semi-pot builder out there to see if anyone else hit the clubs. It just felt really exploratory to me, and so I thought about this for a while, and I wasn't totally sure I wanted to gamble my tournament life on it, but now I started thinking, what would I have called pre-flop? What would I have called the flop bet with? And I decided to go with just a min click.
Okay, so now we're just really getting into a question of one guy betting to see where he's at, and now basically your min click is kind of trying to answer that question, but at the same time, it's a way to see where you're at. Yeah, I mean, you can fold to a shove, right?
Yeah, exactly. Now I can fold to a shove. I can maintain my tournament life. And then I also have the option to rep a really strong hand if he does not have the king of clubs. Now I can represent the made nut flush, potentially get them off of the sets, get them off of the straights, because now my min click seems incredibly strong from last to act.
Yeah, and I think that given that the original raiser has checked this card, your raise is almost certainly going to get rid of him.
You would think.
Oh, okay. So he's Russian and he's doing something really, really tricky. And I think I'm about to find out why you said as a preamble to this hand that it was going to be played in a strange way. All right.
So I actually got 2 calls, 2 flats behind.
Okay. At that point, when you get 2 flats on the turn to your min raise, you've got to be thinking, I don't love my queen jack right now.
That's exactly right. And now I'm looking at going into the river. We've got a pot that is $240,000, and we only have 72 behind.
This is why it's so hard to play many streets when you start with a relatively short stack. I mean, your M was like 9. You had 24 big blind, 25 big blinds. You've got multiple opponents, putting more chips in. I bet you regret raising.
I absolutely regret raising at that point. I thought I would at least be able to get heads up and take control on the river depending on which card comes. You know, we still have the option to fill up the boat. We still have the option for the backdoor straight draw. There are lots of things that still could come. So we still had value and perceived equity. But yeah, at that moment, I felt the pit in my stomach.
Okay, so what happens on the river?
So the river is effectively a blank. It's the 4 of diamonds, so that's not likely to improve anyone's hand. The original under the gun raiser checked, And then the monster stack bets out 5 big blinds, which in this particular case is just 30. So doesn't even put me all in. Again, I'm sitting with 72,000 and he only bets 30 into a pot of 240,000. So he's betting a sixth of the pot on a river blank.
Yeah, I mean, this means that we have to call and win
1 in 8.
one time out of 7, 1 out of 8, right?
Yeah, 1 out of 8, because 240, he's betting 30
Right.
and a 240. We call that. It's 1 in 8.
Okay, so this is ridiculous. Will we win that often? Probably, but maybe not, because the original raiser who started this party under the gun called your raise on the flop. So what is his range for flatting that raise on the flop? Is he slow playing a full house? Did he pick up a flush draw? Like, does he have like pocket tens and he called because he has the 10 of clubs? I mean, what in the heck is going on here? I don't know, but I hate being in this position. Obviously, he's bet less than half your remaining stack. The pot is so big. How often are you going to win when you call? It's got to be more than that, right?
Yeah, and we've talked before about sometimes if you leave someone a little bit of chips, they're more likely to call than if you put their tournament life at risk.
Of course.
So this feels super, super, super value-y, but as you said, I only have to be right 1 in 8 times. And I'm still in the tournament, even if I'm wrong. So then the table talk started. And that's where this hand gets really interested. So the Eastern European starts saying, how many queens can there possibly be?
Which is, by the way, against the rules. No one should be commenting on the cards during a multi-way hand. And that's for sure the rule. There are some murky rules about whether you can talk about the hand when your head's up. But the fact that there are 2 opponents, this player should keep his mouth shut. I mean, maybe there are some things you're allowed to say, but that's definitely not one of them.
Especially when it's not your turn to act and you're not closing out the action. You know, if you were heads up and you're closing out the action, maybe I could say a little gray area, but it was still my action at the time he made the comment. And he did get a warning from the dealer. So
that's good. And given that, since he has done this, angle or this rule break, whatever you want to call it, how did you interpret that comment by him?
I interpreted that he either has the queen or he's strongly repping the queen. So I immediately think if he does have the queen, then I probably have him beat because I have best kicker, set of queens with the jack kicker. So I probably have him beat, and immediately I'm no longer really worried about him. I'm only worried about the big stack.
Now, I wasn't there, and you were, but I would actually interpret that as the opposite, like that he feels like he's not getting enough attention, and he wants you guys to not forget that he's still in the hand. And so I think he wants you to fold. Maybe that is what you're saying, though, isn't it? That is actually, now that I think about it, that's what you're saying.
Yes.
He's trying to chime in here because he doesn't want you guys to forget about him. You're not heads up, and I'm still here. And so almost anything he says is like calling attention to himself, which does eliminate the nuts, because when you have the nuts, you want to disappear behind a tree so nobody can see you hiding in the woods, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And so that comment, based upon the way the action has gone, especially when the queen hit and you had a semi-donk bet in the mid position, and then all of a sudden, you just get a flat from me, that says someone probably has a queen. And so it sounds like he is very concerned about that. And so I immediately was no longer worried about him.
Okay. Well, in light of that, I think we can call. I mean, I hate to leave myself with 40,000 when the blinds are so high. But, like you say, you'll still be in the tournament. And you can spin that up if you're wrong. But the price is too good. The situation is too hard to figure out. For me, anyway. Maybe if we got, some crusher on here, they would say, well, this is always that and that's always this, so I can fold. But yeah, I'm willing to put the chips in.
And then that's exactly what I did. I just called there. I wasn't willing to put my tournament life at risk. And then surprisingly, the under the gun, even though his comment made him seem incredibly weak, he called as well. So
wow.
All 3 of us went to showdown.
There's no way we're winning this pot.
Yeah. So we were actually right on the under the gun. The under the gun did have a weak queen. So he was first to just flip it over and show. And then he said, you got a stronger queen, and pointed to me. And
How weak was his under-the-gun queen?
It was a queen 9.
Was it at least suited?
It was suited.
Okay. All right. I mean, I think that's a pretty marginal decision to even open that hand in the first place.
He actually did have the 9 of clubs, so he did have the option for a flush to come on the river. I don't know if that makes it that much better. It's not a nut flush draw, but he had the queen 9 offsuit with the 9 of clubs.
Yeah, I think that's a fold. Just FYI, everyone, if you're in a poker tournament and you're under the gun with a suited queen 9, in most cases, you just want to throw that hand away.
Yeah. And then before I had the chance to open my hand and show it, and he did call my hand. He said, "You've got the queen jack, don't you?" The monster stack of the table flipped over jack 10 for the flopped straight.
Yeah, and you have to worry about that. And it does kind of make sense. Like, he's got the straight. He wants to bet something and protect his hand, but he doesn't want to put in too many chips because he's behind when you guys have full houses, which you both could. Mm-hmm. So I guess when you look at it in retrospect, and this is the value really of going over hands like this, is when you look back on it, it's like now everything kind of makes sense. The overcall or the call of your raise on the turn makes sense because he has a queen and he's not ready to fold it, especially because he also has a 9 high flush draw that could be good. So his the way he played that street makes sense once you know what he had, but at the time we were both like, what? But yeah, and now his table talk also makes sense because he doesn't have anywhere near the nuts. If he's going to chime in with how many queens are there, he's not talking about how many ace-ace combos are there, how many king-king, how many king-queen. Like, he does not have a full house when he calls attention to himself like that, of course. And then, the chip leader's plays make a lot of sense too. He wants to bet and try to get value and protect against a possible flush, but he also wants to not lose too much when he is behind. So it all makes sense, and I guess Jack 10 is good, and the rich get richer.
The rich get richer. And in retrospect, and you think about the hand, and you say, okay, what if I had Jam, the club, coming out? But then there are the chances that you're drawing into king, queen, full house, or someone else having that flush. Maybe the when he bet out with the 24,000, that's the flush. In hindsight, you always say, well, geez, maybe if I'd have jammed the turn, I could have gotten him off his straight and I could have scooped the pot myself. But, as played, we hate saying that, but as played, I think it's just one of those hands. It is what it is, and you go broke.
In my experience, Brent, trying to get people to fold a straight in a $500 tournament is not really a good strategy.
Yeah, especially with it being the close to the tournament chip leader. If he wasn't the tournament chip leader, he was pretty close. He just had so many chips that he could take chances.
Yeah, and so I think you do need to think about that when you're considering making some elaborate bluff. How many chips does my opponent have? How much would it hurt him to call and be wrong here is very important. That's a really important question. Now, his problem is when he bets so small on the river, if you raise, he has to pay off, right? Even though his straight is probably almost never good when you raise, he still has to call.
Yeah, of course, at that point, if I'm calling it off, he only has to call at 30,000 into a 300,000 K plus pot. I mean, he's getting 11-1 at that point.
Yeah, and he'll have to call that.
Yeah. And I can't imagine that he wouldn't do that. I think the only way that either the hand works for me or I get away from the hand is if the 4th club does hit on the river, and then someone does lead out. Then I can probably get away from it because I'm not holding any clubs.
And you can't beat anything at that point.
Right.
You can't beat a flush, a straight, or anything. You just have 3 queens. And the only hand you can beat realistically is queen 10 or queen 9 if for some reason that hand's in people's under the gun opening range, as it is in this case. But yeah, you don't beat enough to call in that scenario. Yeah, so you kind of want another club to save you some more chips.
Or potentially if it does go, 4th club and it goes check, check, maybe at that point I just, grab them and shove and hope that I can move everybody off if no one else is holding a club. We now know that the under the gun had the 9 of clubs. Question is he going to call with what at that point would be 12th nuts? He may lay it down at that point.
Yeah, would you do that though? I mean, is that the play? If they both check this river, do we shove?
Well, I don't think at that point the way the hand played out, I don't think I have enough to call. I don't think I'm ever good there. I'm worried about the straight at this point. I'm worried about another, queen. I'm worried about, I don't know. Do we feel strong enough with 4 clubs out there? And if so, why would they not seek to value that river? If they both check, it says to me, we don't have strong clubs. The only way feel like I'm really winning this pot at that point is if I do turn my hand into a bluff.
So you're saying if the river comes a blank club, and they both check to you, you would actually stick it in.
That would be a consideration. I would really have to think about it. That kind of goes both ways. We do have 3 queens, top kicker. That does have some showdown value, but the way that this hand was played out, that would seem incredibly weak to me on their part.
That's amazing to me because I could probably count on my hands how many times I've had such a strong hand that I turned into a bluff. Like if you shove, you don't want any callers.
Yeah, but as you alluded to earlier, when we did that min click raise on the turn and they both flat, that just screams strength.
Or does it scream, I'm drawing?
But then why would they check and not value the river?
Yeah, wow, that is a great hand. That is a fun hand to think about. Do you have time to do the other one? I know you have a plane to catch. All right, so let's leave it to the listeners. Again, guys, go into the description and follow us in the TPE Discord and tell us your thoughts on that fascinating hand. I mean, that's one of the most interesting hands I've heard all summer. That's a good one. Yeah. Really good one. All right, so this one's going to be heads up. You already spoiled that.
Yeah, so this next one starts off 3-handed, but does quickly get to heads up.
Same tournament?
This actually was the Tournament of Champions played out at the Commerce Casino. So anyone that gets a bracelet or a ring throughout the year has the opportunity to play in the Tournament of Champions.
Sick brag.
Yeah, I can't help it. It is a $1 million guaranteed tournament, so it's worth the trip out there. I've got mixed feelings about the Commerce. I will leave those for another time. But at this particular, it's fairly early in the tournament. We were actually coming up on the first break.
Now, philosophically, when you go to play in the Tournament of Champions, you know that everybody there has won a bracelet or a ring. And now, not all bracelets and all rings are created equal. Obviously, some of these were like some guy in Pennsylvania with 65 opponents online, right? But still, technically speaking, that's a bracelet, that's a ring, whatever it is. It's a free roll as well. Yeah. So kind of heading into this, what was your mindset about strategically how to approach it?
Well, as sort of what you said, you're going to have top tier players that are playing that game. The Daniel Lowrys of the world with a gazillion rings. Ari Engel was there. Hawkins was there. All these guys that just have accolades and super talented players. Then you also have, the garage poker guys. The guys that decided, as you said, to fire a 67-person tournament out of Michigan or whatever, and had a lot of that. The recent influx of online bracelets and online rings has definitely changed that player pool a little bit. And it was a large pool. I mean, I think we ended up having, 600, 700 people and playing this free roll. So it was a very large, but you're going to have that mix of table. So Poker Mama, Casey, was at my table, who's obviously a very, very accomplished. She is a fantastic player. So there were some serious players there.
Yeah, Casey Mills, that is. So, all right, let's hear it. So this is early on?
Yeah, so this is early on. This is right before the first break. So we're at the 300, 500, 500 level. We're 8-handed at this particular point in the tournament. We are just slightly below what I'd consider average. We have 45,000 chips at this point. So we are, what's that, 90 big blinds, right? Mm-hmm. And so we are on the button in this hand as well. Didn't intentionally pick 2 hands on the button, but we did. And the other 2 villains in this hand are the small blind, who has us barely covered. That is your typical, what I would consider garage poker guy. Talks a lot, very splashy, high VPIP, lots of tattoos, just kind of glad to be there and living it up. Then there was a very, very serious player on the under the gun +1, and he was the table chip leader, and he was sitting with 70,000 chips.
Okay.
So we have the 45,000 in chips, and the under the gun raises to slightly over 2, so he raises to 1,200 off of that 500 big blind. We are in the button, comes around to us, and we look down to King of Diamonds, King of Clubs.
Okay. So, I think we basically want to always 3-bet this spot. We've got to try to start building a pot now. We've got a hand that is almost certainly good. And if it's not good, we're probably just going to go broke on it. Whatever. I've got kings in a free roll. I know it's a Tournament of Champions, but it's also at the Commerce. And I'm not going to be looking to 3-bet fold my kings. I'm trying to get all in. pre-flop if possible. So let's put in a nice healthy raise.
And that's exactly what I did. And I know the solvers are looking at some of those sizing and whether there should be variability in sizing. I try to always fall back onto the, keep your opens, keep your raises about the same X, just to not be able to give away any bet sizing tails. And in this particular case, I made it 4,000 to go.
Yeah, which is what you would do with your entire 3-betting range, correct?
Yeah, I would do the same thing with a nice queen jack suited, 7-8 suited, maybe ace 5 suited. I know that seems to be everyone's favorite darling hand right now, but I would do the exact same thing.
Great.
So in this particular case, the small blind that I mentioned earlier, the garage poker guy called. The big blind surprisingly folded at that point, and then the under the gun just called as well. So immediately looking at the ranges, I'm thinking that they've got those kind of suited connector-ish or maybe weak aces, suited aces. That would be what they would be calling them.
And small and medium pairs as well.
Yeah, sure. Looking to set mine there.
Yeah. Okay.
So at this point, we're going into the flop. There's 13,000 in the middle, so we've got an SPR of 3.2. And the flop comes out Jack of clubs, 9 of spades, 7 of diamonds. So Jack, 9, 7, complete rainbow.
Okay, and we have pocket kings. All right, so what's the action?
So then all of a sudden, the small blind donks out 5,000.
All right, and this is the tatted up garage player. Who knows what tournament he won to get here? What does the other guy do?
And then the under the gun +1, the European guy with the larger stack, I'm the effective stack, he just flats.
Okay, so, look, there are hands that are beating us. Jack 9, any set, 2 pairs, right?
8-10?
Yeah, well, obviously 10-8. I don't know if the small blind should have that versus a 3-bet. And I don't know if the first guy should have that either. I'm not especially worried about 10-8. I think both of your opponents at least should have theoretically folded 10-8 to the 3-bet pre-flop. So I'm not going to sit here and worry about 10-8, but we do have to worry about the sets and 2 pair. Jack 9 is a hand that people like. Overall, I think kings are good a lot. So it's bet call.
So it is bet call. The small blind leads out 5,000, and the under the gun just calls.
Okay, so he bets 5, and then the other guy calls 5K. I'm just going to raise. I'm going to announce my presence here. I'm just going to say, I would make it something like 17. I really think the kings are good a lot. They could have so many draws, right? Queen 10's a possibility. There's just a lot of hands they can have. I know there's no flush draw available, but I just want to try to get called by top pair. Especially a top pair combo like Jack 10, right? Hands like that are not going to fold to my raise, and I have a good chance of getting all in against them. So, yeah, I would make it 17.
Yeah, I briefly thought about 10s, although that probably would be unlikely. We might have seen a 3-bet with the 10s. For some reason, I felt ace-jack in my head would be a hand that the small blind would just call, especially if it was an offsuit, not wanting to put in the 3-bet there and reopen it.
No, the 4-bet and reopen.
Oh, yeah, 4-bet and reopen. That was a consideration. And I did exactly what you said. And I was concerned about my sizing here, so I'm glad that you said 17. I went slightly lighter, and I made it 15,000.
Yeah, I think it's a very negligible difference. The fact is we start this whole hand with what, like 45?
So we started the whole hand with 45. At that point, we've put in just 4,000, right? So we got about 40,000 behind.
Yeah, basically I'm raising to get pot committed here. The only way I'm folding is if they both shove.
Yeah, and so after that 15,000 raise, we're then left with 25,000 behind, and we've basically made the pot a $40,000 pot pre-call.
Right. So I'm glad you raised. What did they do?
The small blind 3-bets all in for his entire stack of 46,000, and then the under the gun folds.
Yeah. Look, we're losing to Jack 9 and the sets. I don't think 9-7 is in his calling the 3-bet range, and I'm not really sure that if he should have Jack 9. So it's really just he's representing a set. And the question is, does he have it? I don't know. I wasn't there, but I didn't put in all these chips to fold an overpair to a guy that's got tattoos and plays poker in his garage. That's what we're here for. I want this action. Let's go. I call.
Yeah, I felt exactly the same way, and I did call. So the question is, do you want to know the results, or do you want to leave everybody hanging?
I mean, I don't care. I don't care. I think we made a good play.
Yeah.
So, but you could tell us.
Yeah, I felt confident as well. I thought that possibly it was a strong jack. Maybe some sort of weird draw. Maybe
Queen 10, certainly.
Yeah, and I felt the same way. The results were he actually did have sevens.
Okay. I mean, look, there's really 3 realistic hands that we're losing to, and if you have one, now that I've put in half my stack, almost, you get the rest.
Yeah, we had 25 left, and when he shoves, we're getting 3.5 to 1 on the call. I don't know there's any way you can get away from it. I'm not putting him on aces. He definitely has strong jacks or like as you said, Queen 10 in his range. I did take my time, which is something that I've been working on. That's been a leak of mine, is acting impulsively and kind of knee jerk. So I took my time. I really thought through the hand, and ended up just saying if he's got it, he's got it.
Yeah, I mean, bottom line, if you start this hand with a huge stack, like you have 200 or 300 big blinds, I think we can start talking about folding pocket kings in this scenario. If you describe this opponent differently, like you said that he's a very serious, thinking, careful, cautious player who obviously wants to win this tournament, and it's the most important event of his life. I mean, we 3-bet to try to build a pot. Then we get a flop that has a number of draws and combo draws available. Then we manage to get a guy to go all in on the flop. And yeah, we know there's a possibility we could be behind, but I'm just not in the business of building these pots and then folding kings in that spot. Another hand we haven't talked about, Brent, for the small blind is pocket queens. He's looking at an early position raise followed by a 3-bet from you. Does he really want to 4-bet queens? I think even the solver doesn't always. I think it mostly 4-bets. Maybe it's like 70-30, right?
Yeah.
So that's another hand that's going to like this flop and is going to be pretty happy to get all in.
Yeah. And for this particular player, he's probably not utilizing GTO Wizard to analyze the hands. I think that, for him, queens might have been a pre-flop shove. I don't know. And so, for some reason, I felt like ace jack. I felt that was my read. My read was good. As you said, that a lot of times we just have to go with that table read. And if you're on the fence, a lot of times it's that table read that makes a difference. And in this particular case, I was wrong.
Yeah. Well, you were wrong. Your read was off, but that doesn't mean this isn't a well-played hand. Like, I believe because the likelihood of 10-8 is so small, like, who's really going to call when it goes raise 3-bet? Who the heck has 10-8? Even the original raiser, you raised enough that he should fold 10-8, suited or not. Like, it's just not. Maybe you could put that into your bluff 4-betting range occasionally, but you're not going to call and try to see a flop multi-way.
Out of position
with 10-8 suited. I'm sorry. Like, even the worst amateurs today don't do that.
Yeah. And I think if you actually look at it, set mining out of the small blind when you still have got action behind you with the big blind with 7-7, I think that's even below the threshold that he should be calling the 3-bet pre-flop.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure that the calling range for the small blind in this spot is going to end up being extremely tight. And 7s might barely squeak into it, but yeah, I'm sure like you fold 4s, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
All right, well, that's a good hand. There's some stuff we can definitely play with GTO Wizard on and see, but I mean, like, we're not going to sweat the kings. Like, I'm sure that the Wizard's calling with the kings.
Yeah, and I did run it by a couple of our favorite coaches. I did run that by Mr. Brokos, and I also ran it by Mr. Fitzgerald. They came back with 2 opposite responses, which I thought was very telling. And I will let you guys try to guess which was which. But one of them is going to be operating off the GTO strategy. The other one's going to be looking at kind of an exploitive play, and that's the kind of way that it went. But I found it interesting that they were even split on the hand. So I didn't feel quite so bad if I was, kind of divided on the hand, that two of the best coaches I know are also divided.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally if you have a spot that you want to talk about and all the coaches agree with one decision, then you probably didn't pick that great of a hand to discuss, right? These are the hands that we like to talk about. It's like, oh, it's so close, I don't know which one is better. And then just try to, it really comes down to kind of the details. The devil's in the details, as they say. And in this spot. Now, remind me again on the flop, is it bet? He bets and the other guy calls on the flop?
Yeah, so on this particular hand, on the flop, he's the one who donked out. He donked out with 4,000.
So he flopped 3 sevens and just bet them. And I don't think a lot of players do that. Not when you and the other guy have already shown so much strength. Pre-flop, he raised, you 3-bet, and he called. He overcalled.
Yeah, we're the pre-flop aggressor, and I know that some of the solvers, especially if you're heads up, will say that you need to bet all of your nutted hands, your strong hands, just as you would also bet some draws. And so I think a lot of the solvers would actually recommend putting in a small bet there.
In the small blind shoes?
Yeah, but I do know that introducing donk betting is something that a lot of the higher level players are working on. But as we said earlier, based upon the live table read, this is not, in my opinion, a deeply thinking, highly educated, studied GTO type player.
Right. He's just a guy that has 3 of a kind and wants to put some more money in the pot. And it worked out great for him.
and it worked out great for him, yeah.
All right. Well, Brent, I really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us today. Obviously, both of these hands were pretty interesting. And, what's going on for you the rest of the summer? Are you going to be playing a lot more tournaments?
Yeah, I'm taking a short break. I have to take care of some daily things. Business things. So I'm taking a few days off, but I will be returning to Vegas, playing the Gladiator, then in time for the mini main. And then trying to gear up for the main event.
Nice. Well, I wish you luck in everything you're doing, safe travels for work and everything else. And I hope to get you back on the podcast soon. You can find him at NC Tar Wheel on Twitter. And where else? Anywhere else?
No, that's pretty much it. I don't do the Instagram. I don't Twitch stream, although you're making me want to start. But no, primarily I'm in the center of the universe for all things poker, and that's Twitter. So NC Tar Wheel at Twitter.
Understood. The Twitch stream is a lot of fun. I've been going on there 2 or 3 times a week while I'm out here. I'm playing a lot of the online events. Actually cashed in the bracelet event the other day, which was the $500 mystery bounty with $1 million guarantee. And I do stream with my cards up on a 4-minute delay on twitch.tv/Clayton Comic. Brent, thank you so much for coming back onto the podcast. Always great to see you.
Of course, buddy. You're one of my favorites, and anytime.
So for Brent Lee and for everyone here at Tournament Poker Edge, I'm Clayton Fletcher. Thank you so much for listening.
I wanna hold them like they do in Texas plays. Fold them, let them hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me. Luck and intuition, play the cards with babes to start. And after she's been hooked, I'll play the one that's on her heart.